a simple question, what you're up to.
Sure, thank you, Jens. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this presentation by Meeting C++. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Slobodan Dmitrovic. I am a professional C++ trainer. I was a professional software developer for more than 25 years, and for the past 5 or so years, my time is fully dedicated to C++ training, mainly for the industry in the automotive, telecommunication, and many, many other industries. So I'm also the author of a couple of introductory books on C and C++. And in this course, I'm very grateful to Jens and Meeting C++ for the opportunity to present also our C++ training in video form that is now also available on the Udemy platform. So in short, that would be a short introduction about myself.
Thank you. So let's directly go into the Udemy course, and which is the newest one. What's our audience for this course? What do you target with this course? Like, I mean, it's clearly with beginners, but what did you have in mind when you started working on this?
Sure. Well, the majority of our business revolves around industry, and it's mainly live trainings. And over the course of, during the past 5 years, we've delivered more than 100 C++ trainings for various big clients. But now we felt the need to also make these professional C++ training available to wider audience. So, for example, everybody who is interested in learning C++ language, but didn't know where to start, or perhaps didn't want to read some big books. And so we felt the need to also make our C++ training available in the video form, also for the industry, because we've seen that some of the companies would also like this available to them, so that their developers, their engineers can learn C++ at their own pace. While during the live C++ training, we are limited to a certain time scopes, shall we say up 3 to 5 days is usually the introductory course, but it is a highly intensive, condensed C++ training course. And with these video trainings, you are at liberty of learning at your own pace. Although the course is indeed intended for the industry, now it is available even but to everybody else who would like to learn this, in my opinion, wonderful language. I personally think of C++ as a thing of beauty and elegance, but I am certainly aware of the fact that it is immensely complex language, a language that requires that we have a clear guidance or while learning the language. So with C++, it can be easy to veer off course or stay in some dark corner of the language and spend too much time there, losing track of the big picture and the topics that are really important to us, the topics that we should concentrate our attention to and leave other things beside. So I would also like to say that this training closely matches our live C++ training. Of course, it's not as we don't go into too much details with the video training, but with this video training, I would say that it resembles our live training around 80 to 90%. So, but now it is available at the fraction of the original price offered to the industries. So I hope it also contributes to the popularization of C++ and makes it so that even individuals can have a glimpse of what the professional C++ training looks like. And I hope people like it and adopt it. It is a set of 60 training videos. Perhaps I can even share a screen about some of the topics.
I actually have the course here, so I put I can do that. So this is what the course looks on Udemy, and if you want to go into specifics, then of course, feel free to share your screen.
Sounds good. So basically, it is a collection of around 60 training videos and 60 source code exercises grouped in 12 exercises sets. So what we like to do in our training, first we present a short theoretical introduction, and then we move on to coding in IDE of our choice. We've covered in this course all three operating systems, Windows, Linux, Ubuntu. We did Linux, Ubuntu, and Mac OS. It was an interesting thing in Mac OS, for example, we needed to acquire the hardware to be able to say, look, this is how you install a C++ compiler on Mac OS. This is how you compile your code. So we couldn't rely on any virtual machines or any rented stuff. So we needed also to invest in some hardware as well. Even if it ends up being only one video on Mac OS, but the compiling on Mac OS and Linux is pretty much the same on using the command line. And also, for example, I will bring up a few topics that we concentrated on.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, here are the topics that we were working on. I'll share my screen here in a moment. Yes, so entire screen. There we go. Basically,
yes,
these are some of the topics that we present in our course. Yeah. So it was basically step by step, building in complexity, but it is very important to have a proper order of topics, because it makes sense that we first introduce types, operands, declarations, expressions, and statements prior to working with functions, and not to mention classes. As you can see, classes start at around the 37th video, because all of these things from 1 to 36 need to be in place and properly explained prior to moving to classes. So that was our intention with these. We also wanted to keep it fairly short, because we didn't want to overwhelm people with C++. C++ is a complex language, and deciding on what is and what is more and what is less important is really, well, for us, it's a full-time job. That's what we do. We also try to tweak our trainings as much as we can. And for example, so one of the differences between the video training and live training is that we needed to strike a good balance of the amount of theoretical introduction. Of course, our live trainings go into greater depths and more details when it comes both about theory and practical examples and exercises. And in this video format, we wanted to bring only the bare essentials regarding the theoretical introductions, while not sacrificing the amount of info that you need to be introduced to when working with when learning actually about C++. So it's in total 60 topics, totaling in around 7.5 hours of video material. And also we have exercises as well.
So that sounds all very interesting. What did you learn while creating the course?
We learned that we need to have a proper, how should I say, proper tempo in when creating. When people are watching videos, there needs to be a certain amount of. I mean, our primary goal was to present the relevant C++ information. That was our primary goal. Even if it meant that the retention for the people watching videos can vary, but we wanted to present what we hope to be a quality C++ training that closely matches the live C++ training we are presenting to the industry, basically. So what we learned also, we went through 6 microphones. We also learned that we needed to have 3 different machines, one for Linux, one for Windows, and one for Mac OS. The importance of quality audio. So we ended up, at the end, we went through 6 different microphones and ended up with the SM7B, which is really a professional microphone used by professionals. And that's what we did in our training. A lot of video editing, a lot of, for example, on the topic of classes, one video that we wanted that revolves around classes ended up being around 20 minutes long. That's our longest video. So when presenting classes, you really need to talk about the data members, member functions, and the access specifiers. Also declarations and instantiation of a class. And all of these topics, in a way, make introduction to class. And only then can we jump to special member functions such as constructors and destructors and overloading operators, etc., etc. So that was our probably longest, and it is. And also it includes in itself 5 exercises, that particular video. Also, every video consists of a theoretical introduction, a lot of diagrams, not a lot, but a fair amount of diagrams. Also visual pointers in each of our video. And then we go to the, in our course, we used Visual Studio for coding, but we also explain how to compile and run your programs on command line on Linux and macOS. And there was a question of which source code editor should we choose for Linux and macOS. And in our research, we found out that the Visual Studio Code is really widely used nowadays for coding. So we went with that one. Also, yeah, it was a nice thing. It was a lot of reiteration. The people also want to know which software we used for editing and screen capture. We used the Camtasia Studio, which is widely used, and I don't know if it's industry standard, but it's certainly quite popular and quite powerful, while presenting us with the simplicity.
That's interesting, but let's get back to C++. So on which standard is your course based? What C++ standard can I expect to learn when I start C++ with your course?
That's a great question, and one that often pops up in our live training. The standard, while learning the C++, the choice of standards is not really relevant as long as you have at least C++ 11 standard in mind. So C++ 11 standard should be the bottom line when learning C++ and when writing programs nowadays. So we went with C++ 11 and C++ 14 while explaining the smart pointers, more precisely unique pointers, and also we there mentioned that should make unique, for example, is not available in C++ 11, but it is available in C++ 14. So I would say C++ 11 is the bottom line. And because the industry today, even the most of the industry today still relies on C++ 14 and 17 because those are the standards that are fully implemented, that are tested, and that have stood the test of time really well. So I would say a mix of 11 and 14. When talking about range-based loops, it is 11. Move semantics is also 11, and the smart pointers is 11, etc., etc. So mostly C++ 11. But I should emphasize that when you are learning C++, nowadays, the choice of standard is not relevant that much as long as you have at least C++ 11 way of thinking in mind.
So that directly makes me follow up with this question: like, do you even cover anything after 14?
Well, C++ 14 mainly rectifies a few shortcomings of the C++ 11 and adds very not too much to the content of this language and the standard library. So yes, we cover C++ 14 in terms of we're talking about the stud make unique function, for example. And but as I
But
said,
are you covering C++ 17 with very on top of
no.
the essence? So
That's a good question, because there was a question whether should we implement features, C++ features in this course, or should we make it a separate course? So we didn't want to make it overwhelming for people to talk in depth about C++ 11, 14, and 17. And that's why we decided to keep that for a different course. But we covered almost everything, yes, from the C++ 11.
You basically you have now the basics of the modern era, and which are well mature, and then you set up on follow courses.
Exactly, correct.
That's also a valid thing to do, I think. Let me see my questions. So you especially mentioned buying hardware for being able to say this is also running on macOS. And I know that macOS, of course, has their own Apple Clang version, etc., etc. And so basically, again, it's a very interesting thing to just go into this. And what has been your experience, your user experience, as that is probably something which is new to you too.
Sure. There was this notion during our research that you have to install the entire Xcode IDE and development environment, but for C++, you don't really. You have to install Xcode command line tools and use the Apple's Clang++ version of the C++ compiler. One of the also interesting things there on macOS is that while compiling, this compiler also offers aliases, so you can even compile your source code on macOS using G++ syntax. So that's an interesting thing also. And on macOS, yeah, pretty much works really the same as on Linux and on macOS. So we install Xcode command line tools. We keep the source code editor on the left-hand side. We keep the terminal open on the right-hand side. We write the code on the left-hand side, compile it in a command line, and see the output of our program. So we didn't go with any incorporated or contained IDE solution where you click run and that, because we felt the need that, especially on Linux and macOS, you are probably, in our opinion, better introduced to C++ if you are using the command line to compile your program, especially in the beginning. And on Windows, we use the comfort of the Visual Studio IDE. So there aren't that many differences between macOS and Linux C++ programming. Both basically are compiling. Throughout our course, you will mainly spending most of your time in a single source file. But when we talk about source code organization, you will be learning about header files and source files and how to compile multiple source files, etc., etc. So it's basically command line compiling both on Linux and macOS.
Okay, so that pretty much answers the question which I already had. Like, what build systems are you using? So I guess as when I take the course, I have access to the C++ files and to the project files. Are you using CMake for this, or are you just generally?
Yeah, that's a good question. We strongly feel that when you are starting to learn C++, so there is no need for you to use some build systems in the beginning, because in our opinion, it introduces another level of complexity into an already complex language. So you don't have to worry about build systems in the beginning. You should rather concentrate your attention on the language itself. So most of the time, when you are learning about introductory C++, you'll be spending your time with one or couple of more source files, basically. So the concepts need to be adopted first prior to moving to build systems. So a simple command line compilation string that both compiles and runs our executable code should suffice in the beginning.
All right. So you mentioned Visual Studio. Did you try any other IDEs for Linux or cross-platform solutions for the course? Have you any thoughts on that?
We did try experimenting with running in Visual Studio Code IDE. And during the past few years in our live trainings, we also did that. Some people like to do compiling by clicking on run and seeing the output in Visual Studio Code. But after some trial and error, we came to the conclusion that it is much easier for us to simply keep whatever editor you choose on the left-hand side, write the source code there, and compile independently in the terminal window when learning C++. Because, or you can also opt to compile and run your program in Visual Studio Code as well. But when it comes to level of comfort, especially on Windows, we strongly feel that Visual Studio currently is the easiest solution. You can install Visual Studio Community, for example, when learning C++, which is a free version. And it is fully functional, fully capable. In our courses, we use the Pro version of the Visual Studio, but you might as well install Visual Studio Community, which is perfectly fine when learning C++. So when it comes to IDE, that would be our recommendation number one.
We have an audience question. And so do you touch things like design patterns in this course at all?
No. Design patterns and software design and software architecture in C++ is a topic of its own. And we need to learn about the introductory C++ topics prior to moving to those. And I can highly recommend the work. If you're interested into design patterns in C++ and software design in general using C++, I can highly recommend the work of my fellow peer, Klaus Igelberger, who also specializes in C++ software design, shall we say. Highly recommend his work. Also, Rainer Grimm also talks about design patterns. So his work is also highly regarded and highly appreciated, especially by me. I mean, I have huge respect for both of them. I would like to take this opportunity to encourage you to start learning C++. I mean, regardless of the perceived complexity, or perhaps you read somewhere that it can be an overwhelming or overly complex language, I can assure you that once the solid knowledge base is in place regarding C++, it is immensely, immensely powerful, and it can be also immensely entertaining if you wish. So
yeah, that actually brings me to the question: why should one learn C++ today? Why should people get started? And I think you're like the right person to ask this, because you have all the books and see like the demand for this. Is that still a thing?
Sure, of course it is. You would be surprised as to how much of an industry relies on C++. I mean, when you sit in your car and turn on the autopilot, chances are that a great deal of that system is developed in C++, or our satellites are running on software written in C++. When you are picking up money from the teller machine, that's also C++. When you're buying a train ticket, that's also C++. So the story goes on and on. I think you should learn C++ today because it is a wonderful language, and especially unique language that offers immense control and immense power when handling both the complexity and the speed. C, for example, C language handles speed things, speed, the topic of speed. But C++ handles both the complexity and the speed. So it offers classes and templates, which brings rise to the immensely powerful standard library in C++, which is containers. We also talk about those as well. So yes, I really think you should learn about C++ today.
All right. We do actually have an interesting audience question, which comes from someone who works with legacy C++ code using MFC and also has services written in C++ 14. And so they ask, could you please provide pointers on connecting legacy C++ applications with services written in modern C++?
Legacy applications with services. Yes, I can. If the question probably revolves around how to refactor your legacy code with modern C++ facilities. Sure, I can offer you. Today in modern C++, we tend to think in terms not of raw arrays and raw pointers. So we want to stay away from those as much as possible. That is the general consensus.
No, I think the question is very specific about connecting. So they're not legacy. So they don't have the ability to refactor their own code base. That's nobody does that, right? If you have a code base with MFC, you're doing what MFC does. You cannot like refactor your MFC.
Yeah, I get it. The Microsoft Foundation classes. Well, that's a very specific topic. I mean,
and how do you connect this with libraries written in modern C++?
Well, it is a big question. I think that's a topic of its own. I mean, it comes to build systems. It comes to many, many other various factors. So, that's a good question. One that's perhaps deserves another interview.
All right. Maybe we come back to that question in the future. As a developer myself, I think you basically need to have like an API interface which lets you connect to those systems and which makes clear like where is going their location and which are the responsibilities. And then that can be easy. I think the challenge is to, especially with newer standards, the challenge might be to compile MFC still with a compiler that also then has the same ABI with modern standards, and that might be the biggest challenge there, which I see that you might have, the older compilers still being used for the older source code things, and then it's not that easy to just link to a library which maybe is just using the newest stuff, Clang or GCC, and you're using an old GCC or Clang version for the other ones. But as you said, this is a really, really big topic, which might not get into too much. Let's close this interview with a simple question. On beginning with C++, how did you get started?
When I was a young developer, I learned C++ basics from a resource, from an online resource. Then I read the book, and back then when I was a young developer, I was under the impression that I really understood C++. But what was really eye-opening to me was the work of Scott Myers and his effective C++ books. And that really motivated me to dedicate the majority of my career up to now to C++. So that opened completely new worlds, completely new world of opportunity, shall we say, when learning C++. So Scott Meyer's work was really something that motivated me to go in this direction, shall we say. So I can highly recommend his work. He was and still is really an amazing professional. Highly recommend his work. And then once you go into intermediate and some advanced topics around C++, it is really both entertaining and from time to time it can be challenging, but for the most part it is immensely entertaining, I should say. And then from that point on, I worked as a professional C++ developer. Then I progressed on to working as a research and development software developer, etc. So independent consultant, etc. So, but now for the past 5 years, I really dedicate myself to C++ training. I take great. I really enjoy working with this wonderful language. There is always something new to explore, something new to learn about, and present that to the audience, to the work. So, yeah, that would be my answer.
Nice. Thank you. Let me quickly plug your book also, which I guess this is all based on. So this is an updated version covering also the newer standards. If you're like interested in the newer standards, then that is an option to have this as a hardcover. But also let's circle around back to the course. Let me post 2 links. Well, I think what it's doing there, right? Let me post 2 links. This is a link to the course, which I'm posting now. And then you've also shared a link to review the course, and you're asking for feedback. So if you're having more experience in C++ and just want to see, like, what's offering there, what are Slobodan's thought on beginning with C++, etc., then that review link is valid until the end of March. And Slobodan asks for your feedback. If you that's a free, you basically can take the course for free then, or see the content for free. But Slobodan would like to have some feedback from you until the end of March. This link is valid then, otherwise it's the course. And I've heard that already 300 people have taken the course, and I guess you already had your first positive feedback on the course, and also with the books, etc. A lot of background here. Thank you for your time, Slobodan.
Thank you, Jens. Thank you.